Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Paul.
Well, good. There was an article this week that got a lot of attention because this famous non-libertarian governor of California decided he'd get into the practice of medicine and decided that their law on immunizations was much too lax. They actually allowed people. Of course, I don't believe the law should have existed, but the California law actually recognized that there could be some exemptions, for medical reasons or for personal beliefs. And this law repealed that and said, no more exemption. I am the king, I am the dictator, and this is what is done because it's irrefutable. The science is in, and everybody has to take these shots. Now, Jim Carrey, an actor, came forth and he volunteered his position, which I think is pretty accurate. He called the governor a corporate fascist because obviously corporations are involved in the drug industries and all. So this has stirred up a hornet's nest. There's already a referendum going on right now to try to repeal it. But to me, it seems like it might be a little bit too late. Why'd they elect this guy anyway? And why do the people do that? And when are they going to wake up? There's just so many people who can come to Texas. So but it's still something very worthwhile. And we have two things to deal with today. One is the medical issue, and the other is the rights issue. Who gets to make these decisions?
That's right. And you talked about how he signed this, but it's always about fear, isn't it? Never let a crisis go to waste. You were saying before the show, what put this forward?
Yeah, well, there was this tremendous epidemic, and nobody likes epidemics. And this epidemic broke out, I understand, at the amusement park
in California,
Disneyland. Disneyland, and people started getting measles. You're not supposed to get measles anymore. Of course, when I was growing up, everybody got the measles, and I think I had 4 of the childhood diseases in one year.
And you're still around.
Yeah. So, but no, they located that it actually was spread at Disneyland, and they decided, well, this is a crisis. 100 people got the disease, and
how many deaths?
Nobody died, but how many people might die from this? And that makes me recall about the swine flu vaccine that I voted against for the first month or so I was in Congress, where under Ford, we had to immunize against flu. And 2 of us in the Congress voted against this compulsory national immunization, another doctor and myself, Larry McDonald. And it turned out that more people nobody died from it was a farce. It was a false alarm. And there was never an epidemic. They gave these shots and more people died, of course, and a lot of other serious diseases from that.
From the shots,
yeah, from the shots. But the question is first, the medical question, and the second is the liberty issue. And I think I think medically, there's a lot of arguments still going on what should be done. And I think that it's not hard and fast. It hasn't been settled. I think sometimes you hear that. There's absolutely no discussion on global warming. Yeah. Everybody knows the absolute facts, and if you don't, you're some sort of nut. Yeah. And they don't look at it. And this is the way this is. But the bigger question for me is, why do we allow our politicians to get involved and make major decisions like this? So I think that what we must do is, further the education. And there is a lot going on with the education of this, because there is a great deal of danger with these immunizations.
There's the perception that parents who decide not to do this are living in a cave somewhere. They can't read and write. But I happen to know a lot of people that on the medical side have objections, and they research exhaustively. They research everything they can because they truly do care about their children. So I think it's very unfair to label these, but of course that's what you do when you want to demonize people.
Well, being in the medical profession, there was the temptation, and a lot of doctors still go along with this. They say, well, it's been tested by the FDA, and the FDA has given a sign of approval. But the FDA is a menace. They for years have denied drugs from going on the markets that could have been helpful, and then they put them out in the market, And every night I see an ad on TV that somebody's going to get sued, which includes the doctors, for doing something the FDA said was safe and effective. So it's sort of like a moral hazard. Yeah. Oh, okay, the doctors say the FDA said this is okay. But over the years, I got more and more conservative about using new medications, and there have been so many of these medications, like that anti-inflammatory drugs, Vioxx. Yeah. I mean, it was a deadly drug, and it finally got taken off the market. But it's back to ownership, our lives and our responsibility to our children. And it shouldn't be the government. But, you know, the argument they generally use is that, well, you got to protect the community. That was one of Brown's argument. we have to protect the community. He didn't ever say anything, we have to protect the rights of individuals.
Of exactly.
And it's for the common good, for the public interest, and for the community, which is everybody and nobody. But guess what? The definition of what is good for the community is done by thugs. It's done by the fascists. It's done by moneyed interests. It's done by the drug companies, and that's where we get into trouble, because people make a lot of money off the drug industry.
And the argument to me seems illogical. They say that everyone has to be immunized because for the community's sake, but if you believe that the immunizations are successful and good for your children, then you should get it for your own children, leave other people alone, and then your children will be safe.
Yes, but they say it wouldn't be safe for somebody else. But if they got their shots, they would be safe.
But the other argument is, you know, we talk about this too, they say, well, there's this big exception. What about people with compromised immunity that can't get these?
Yes, and I think that's worth thinking about, because that's a serious problem. People sometimes are born with this, and they have a tough time surviving. And it is true that if they're in a school where people are more likely to have certain diseases, they could have get into a lot of trouble. But they'll get into trouble if they're exposed to somebody with strep throat or a staph infection or a cold. You know, a cold could turn into pneumonia for people who don't have no immunity. So that's a false argument, I think, and it's just an excuse. It's an excuse for people to believe they know what's right. You know, there are economic planners and there are social planners, and this group goes with the economic planners, the mischief makers, you know, and it tends more to be the liberals that will do this, but they are the ones that, overstep the bounds, and they don't think about, or their goal is to undermine liberty. It seems like it is, because they see it as an excuse, and we got to take care of the people. But that's the excuse that so much of government is based behind. You know, we have the excuse of economic equality. We get involved with that. We have this excuse that we have to not only deal with these kind of drugs, but make sure that there's no marijuana available. You know, and ironically, there's some pretty good studies coming out now on treatment for autism with marijuana. So, okay, let's say some of these shots causes autism. So the shots the government's enforce creates the autism, and then the government comes along and say the best thing in the world could be, at least, is use of marijuana, but we're going to deny this to you. We'll put you in jail, and we'll put you in jail if you don't take your shots, and we're going to put you in jail if you use the only treatment available. This is so far removed from what is done in a free society. It's not to imply the free society is perfect, because man is not perfect. So there's a lot of mistakes made. But if you choose to raise your kids a certain way, if you make a mistake, yes, it could be a very serious thing. But what if somebody else chooses to tell you what you can do with your kid, and they make a mistake? And you know, what is it? The shots? There's 16 different vaccines that they use. And over a course of a lifetime, it's 69 injections, and most of them come before they go to first grade.
Wow.
I mean, that is just horrible. So if people finally could look at their responsibility and study this and say, hey, maybe that is a little bit too much. 69 different shots that they have. Maybe they could say, well, at least why don't we give less? Yeah. You know, just give less of them and not have a cocktail. Yeah. It should be logical for doctors to understand this about overstressing a system. The other thing that is coming out, but I don't believe they've had time to study this in a double-blind way, and that is that if you take 1,000 kids that never had a shot and 1,000 kids that had all the shots and follow them for 25 years, and see what kind of health patterns they have. Of course, each side argues, one, oh, we saved all these lives with the shots. The other side will say, no, 3 of my kids had shots and 3 of them didn't, and the ones who had the shots were more sickly over the years. And that may be true. The whole thing is they don't know, and the FDA is not going to provide this information because the FDA generally represents special interests. A lot of money is involved
Big
here.
Pharma.
Yeah, big pharma. But I think we're slow in this country to realize this, although there have been groups around, trying to get this out. But in other countries, they're becoming more cautious and backing away from it. Just like the GMOs, they're backing away from some countries more so than in this country because we have the agricultural industry as well. Intervention is bad, and if we had a system where we truly understood the government's purpose is to protect liberty, allow individuals to make decisions, their best choices, they will do it imperfectly. But just think of the harm done when we give too much power, to the government. So hopefully we can participate in this. We've talked about this. There's a growing segment already. I think there's quite a few counties in California that are very, very much opposed to this. That would be another argument for the breaking up of California into 5 states. But in different areas of California, there's more resistance to this, and they're already trying to get signatures, to back away. But that is difficult. It's a lot easier to stir up emotions and get hysterical about the epidemic. And some of these people who got the measles could have died. Yeah. And I wonder if they are thinking about the people who die in inner city violence and automobile accidents and getting struck by lightning and all these things that are happening. But here they talk about the potential harm done if we don't make sure everybody gets that measles shot and poison their system, because these things aren't pure. It isn't like you just get a shot to immune you against the disease. They have to have preservatives in there, just like in foods, and it's usually those additional substances that can be harmful. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I think it's a very, very important issue about the rights of parents and the responsibility of parents to think seriously about which immunizations their children get. But I do not like the idea that parents get blackmailed into this and say, well, they can't come to public school unless they have these shots, and instead they don't have the energy to fight. One thing they should consider doing, they do admit that if you don't want the shots, you can homeschool or you can go to a private school and let them deal with it. Well, then at least send them back their tax money. Do they still have to pay the taxes? What an insult. So it's time we wake up and decide that liberty provides the answers for us, and we don't need to depend on people that now are characterized as fascist corporatists. There are too many of them, and guess which party they belong to? All the parties so far, at least the 2 majors. There's too many corporate fascists in our political system. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and come back to the Liberty Report soon.